Right, morning everyone. Morning. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So for those who don't know me, my name is Elia. As Debbie was saying, today I'll be sharing a message that I spoke at one of the women's events earlier this year. So this is a message that's been on my heart for quite a while. I have been reading and studying this topic like last year, quite a bit last year, and it was very relevant to what I was going through at the time, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. And some of the study that I completed was from a book, actually by Max Lucado, called Anxious for Nothing. Studied that a bit too. So this message today will be a little bit different. As what I like to do is I like to integrate psychological or psychology concepts together with the Word of God, so with the Bible. And so what I've learnt over the years is that the Bible has really important keys for us, for our thinking, for our mental health and our well-being. So I'll just share a little bit about my background for those of you who don't know me. I've completed a master's and a PhD in clinical psychology. I've worked as a psychologist with a range of people of all ages. But my main work has been working in a hospital with adults experiencing chronic disease and cancers. But at the moment, I'm doing something a little bit different. So I'm a lecturer and a researcher at the moment. So Lighthouse Family Church, welcome to your Sunday morning psychology class. So today, I will discuss how to be intentional with our thinking to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. So practicing gratitude has many benefits for us, so it's really, really important. But before we talk about gratitude, we need to talk about our thoughts, our brains, and anxiety, okay? Because gratitude is actually an antidote to anxiety. So in other words, gratitude helps target and lower negative thoughts and anxiety. So let's talk about that. So we've got it up on the screen here. So let's talk about anxiety first. So one of the main functions of our brains are to keep us safe, right? So our brain is trying to keep us safe by looking out into the environment and trying to find changes in our environment or threats or things that may be dangerous for us. But what happens with anxiety is that our brains can perceive real danger and a perceived threat as the same thing. Okay, so I can give an example. So if we go to a job interview, you might be nervous, right? That's understandable. But sometimes we may get really, really, really anxious, like extreme anxiety, okay? Because our brains may be perceiving it as a real danger. Does that make sense? Everyone? Yep. So I'm just explaining this really briefly, so I won't spend too long on this. But our brains, what they do is they sometimes overestimate danger, okay? And they focus on the negative, and they trigger anxiety, and what we know as the fight or flight response. Has anyone heard of that before, the fight or flight response? Yep. So I'll just really quickly explain it. So in a nutshell, what happens is if we're facing danger, our body will get us ready to take action. So our blood will rush to our muscles and many other things to help us confront the danger or to get away quickly, okay? So it's preparing us to take action. So there may be times where we need this fight or flight response. So for all the parents out there, if your child is in danger, okay, you'll get ready, you'll take action, you'll spring into action to protect your children from danger, right? Or if you're driving on the highway and a car's about to merge into you, your body's going to get ready to take action to get to safety. So this happens. But sometimes the anxiety or fight or flight response will trigger even when we're not in actual danger, okay? And that's the point I'm making today. And when this happens, our ability to think and reason and be calm, it lowers, it goes down. And we go into the rabbit hole. We get all the what ifs. What if this happens? And we think about all the worst case scenarios. This happens to me a lot. Does anyone else get this? You get the worst case scenario? Yep. So the main point I want to make today, and it's on this slide, our brains are really powerful, right? But they tend to focus on the negative to protect us from danger. So we must be intentional in redirecting our brains when there's no actual danger. We need to look for the positive and notice the good things. And this is where gratitude comes in. Gratitude is a way that we can be intentional with our thinking, and we'll talk about this a bit more. But let's talk firstly a bit more about thoughts. Okay, so I think we'll go on to the next slide. Yep. So we'll talk a bit more about thoughts and how that fits in. So we can have automatic negative thoughts. And just as it suggests, these thoughts will come without warning, okay? They'll just come into our mind automatically. And these thoughts are generally exaggerated, irrational, inflated. And that some of these thoughts some examples of these thoughts could be, I'm not good enough. No one will ever love me. And it's all over for me. So those are examples. And these automatic negative thoughts, they can often come from beliefs that were created early on in life, okay? So common beliefs that we can develop, these aren't the only ones, but common beliefs we can develop are things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm unlovable. So we might form or develop these beliefs early on in life. Okay, so that's on thoughts. So with our thoughts, what starts to happen is once we develop these beliefs and thoughts, we start to pay attention to stuff around us that fits our beliefs or confirms our beliefs. And so I can explain this using an example. So it's an example I have used before, but I think it's always a powerful example to help show this. So this is my artistic drawing of a sink. As you can see, drawing's not my specialty, but I gave it a go. And I've often drawn this out with clients to help explain beliefs and things like that. So I'll explain it for you today. So this sink, it represents our brains, okay? So our brains have to take in a lot of information, okay? There's a lot competing for our attention. So our brains have to try and take in and manage a lot. Okay? But if we were to try and process and take in everything, our brains would overflow. So our sinks wouldn't handle it, or our brains, they would overflow. Okay? So to prevent this, our brain will manage information in two ways. And you can see it there on the screen. So the first one is forgetting. Okay? So forgetting. So the easiest way to explain this is, so I'm sure there's a lot of things that you don't remember from primary school or high school. So maybe you learnt some math or history or geography. How many people still remember all of those things? I'm assuming not many. So your brain's gone, we don't need that anymore, and it's emptied it out. Okay, it's flushed it out. It's forgotten. We don't need that anymore. Forgotten. So that's one way that our brains will try and manage all of this information. But the second thing, and it's a very interesting one, is filtering. Okay, so we can see that the second one's filtering. And filters work by attention, memory, and twisting things. So the easiest way to explain this is through an example. So it's just a silly example. So the one that I always use is, let's say we all have the belief that red cars are faster, okay? We know deep down, red cars, they're fast. They're faster than all the other ones, okay? So let's use this example and have a look at it. Okay, so you have this belief, and so you're going to be paying attention to all the fast red cars, okay? So you're cruising down the highway, and you see a red car fly past you. Maybe it's a red Ferrari or something, a red Lambo, and you're like, yeah, red cars are fast, okay? So you're paying attention. Does that make sense for everyone? Yep, you're paying attention to all of the red cars driving past you, okay? And then you've got memories for all of those times you've seen the red cars drive past you. So see all the little water droplets in the sink? They're all the memories, okay? You're collecting, you're paying attention to all of these examples that fit your belief that red cars are faster. Is that making sense for everyone so far? Yeah, okay. All right, but let's just say one day, okay, so you're cruising down the highway, all right, we're cruising down the highway, you see a car in front of you, you're getting really, really frustrated now, they're going really slow, you're thinking, what's going on, they're really, really frustrating you now, and then you notice the car in front of you, it's red, thinking, hang on a second, red cars are supposed to be fast, okay? What your brain does is it starts to twist things, okay? It doesn't fit your belief. So it'll twist things and it will make excuses. So, all right, we'll just think, so you might say, oh, it must be a really old car, okay? So that's why it's not going very fast. It's red, but it's an old car. Or maybe it's the driver. Maybe they don't know how to drive. I don't know. Maybe that's what's going on here. So do you see how we've now twisted things and we've made excuses because it doesn't fit our belief? Yeah, so that's an example. So I have another example, and this is just a made-up one. But let's just say I have the belief that I am bad and I'm unwanted, okay? So I might pay attention to all the times that I've made a mistake, okay? So I'm constantly keeping count of that. And then let's say I'll always kind of notice or pay attention to maybe when people don't invite me out to dinner or exclude me, so I'm paying attention to that. And then I've got memories for all of these things stored up, and that's what I'm constantly paying attention to. Okay, and let's just say someone messages me and they invite me to go out to dinner with them. But then I think, hang on, this doesn't, my brain's going, hang on, this doesn't fit. And so I twist things and make excuses. So I might say, oh, maybe they contacted everyone else and I was the last resort. Everyone else was really busy, so that's why they've contacted me. So does that all make sense? Does this process make sense? Yeah. So this is something that our brains can do and pay attention to things that fit our beliefs. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Yep. So now I want to ask all of you, have you ever stopped to actively think about what you think about? So it's quite a mouthful, so I'll say it again. Have you ever stopped and sat back and actually think about the thoughts that you're having? So this is what psychologists call metacognition on the slide there. So that's called metacognition. So often we just may accept the thoughts that we have and accept our thoughts to be true. Or often sometimes we don't even really think about the thoughts that we're having. We just, we may just accept them to be true. We may not actively stop and consider, is this thought I'm having actually, accurate? Is it really accurate? So, for example, if you ever were to go to a counsellor or a psychologist, they may get you to look at a negative thought and think about where it came from. Is there evidence against the thought? Is there a more rational way to think about it? Is there a more helpful way to think? Is that all making sense? Yep. So these are examples of evaluating our thoughts. And on the next slide, we'll just talk about a verse. So the Bible talks about this in 2 Corinthians 10:5, where it says, we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So what's this telling us? What is 2 Corinthians 10:5 telling us? It's actually telling us to evaluate the thought. It's telling us to consider the thought and take it captive. And Philippians also tells us how to be intentional with our thoughts by telling us how to redirect our thoughts. So notice our thinking and then change it, and it tells us what to think about. So Philippians 4:8, it says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, and admirable, or if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So I know it's easier said than done, but it's something that we can start to practice. So if we have automatic negative thoughts, and they are the ones that are generally exaggerated, inflated, and irrational. So thoughts like, I'm not good enough, no one will ever love me. So we may have those types of thoughts, but despite this, you can still be the air traffic controller of your mental airport, okay? You can occupy the control tower and can direct the mental traffic of your world. So I'll say that again. You can still be the air traffic controller of your mental airport. You can occupy the control tower and direct the mental traffic of your world. So in other words, we can be intentional with our thinking. We can take the thought captive. We can consider the thought that comes into our mind and say, hey, that's not true. God's word says this. Or that's not true. God's word says this about me. This is what God says about me. Okay, so we've talked about thoughts in our brains and anxiety, but now this is where gratitude comes in. So this is where I like to just touch on gratitude. So we can be intentional with our thinking by practicing gratitude. And as the slide says, gratitude involves the expression of appreciation and thanks. So in positive psychology research, gratitude helps people feel more positive emotions and relish good experiences, improve their health, build strong relationships, and deal with adversity. So I just have a really short clip that just explains some of the benefits of gratitude, just to highlight that. So it's only just about for a minute, so a minute 16. So we'll just show you that now.
Research shows that adopting an attitude of gratitude, simply expressing appreciation and being more thankful, can measurably improve your overall well-being. For example, studies prove that gratitude can increase happiness, reduce depression, and strengthen resiliency. Grateful people often experience reduced blood pressure, less chronic pain, increased energy, even longer lives. People who purposefully express more gratitude report higher self-esteem than those who don't, and they're more likely to help others, a pro-social behavior also linked to greater happiness. People who capture grateful thoughts before bed sleep better than those who don't. Why so many positive changes? Because gratitude actually rewires our brains, kickstarting the production of dopamine and serotonin. Like antidepressants, these feel-good neurotransmitters activate the bliss center of the brain, creating feelings of happiness and contentment. This appears to be self-perpetuating. Research suggests that with regular practice, you'll train your prefrontal cortex to better appreciate and retain positive experiences and thoughts, and to deflect the negative ones. Here are a few simple ways to deliberately cultivate that attitude
And we
of
can
gratitude.
end there. Thank you. So that video just highlights the many benefits of gratitude and how it can be really good for our brains. Okay, so another point I wanted to make is that gratitude, it helps us cross the if-only river, okay? So I'll explain that further. So, for example, the if-only river may consist of, if only I were richer, if only I were thinner, if only I were younger. So what gratitude does is it leads us off the river of if only to the valley of already. So we have to intentionally switch from if only to already and think about, what do I already have? So if you can each turn to a neighbour and tell them 2 things that you're grateful for today, and think about things that you already have. So I'll just give you a quick moment to turn to your neighbour and tell them things you're grateful for. Okay, so it's great to hear you all thinking about some of the things that you're grateful for, and thinking about the things that you already have. So we have talked about anxiety and negative thoughts earlier. Well, God's anxiety therapy, it includes a lot of gratitude. Okay, so worry refuses to share the heart with gratitude. So I'll say it again. Worry refuses to share the heart with gratitude. So having gratitude and being grateful will suck the oxygen straight out of worry's world. So we'll just go to the next slide. So Philippians 4:11-13, it says, so it just says, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So Paul wrote this at the time that he was in prison. And he's saying stuff like, while he's in prison, I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. When you actually sit back and think, that's pretty crazy that Paul's writing these types of things while he's in prison. He turns an awful and an unjust situation into Christ-based contentment. So Christ-based contentment is about being grateful for knowing that we have a relationship with God and anchoring ourselves in that. It's also about knowing what we are grateful for and being grateful for what we already have. So remember the changing the if only to what do I already have. Okay, so I'll just ask the music team to come up just while I'm wrapping up. So we've just got the next slide. So these are just some key points that we've talked about this morning. So we need to be intentional with our thinking and actively evaluate our negative thoughts. We can be the air traffic controller of our mental airports, and we can direct that mental traffic. We can be intentional with our thinking and suck the life out of worry's world by practicing gratitude. So we can do this in multiple ways. So just stepping back and just looking at some practical strategies. So just some of those practical strategies may be things like writing a thank you note to someone. So if there's someone that's had a positive impact on your life or who's done something positive, it can be also expressing gratitude and thanks to them and writing a thank you note. You could even write down what you're grateful for. So some people call it a gratitude journal, but it doesn't have to be that. It can just be simply writing down, even weekly or daily, what you're grateful for. And I think at the women's event we did discuss each week writing down something you're grateful for, and then at the end of the year you can then have a look at all of the things you've been grateful for over the year. That's something else that was another idea that was discussed. And then you can also use reminders. So if you forget, you can put a reminder in your phone that will pop up at the same time each day. and then think of some things you're grateful for. It can also be helpful to think of some things you're grateful for before you go to sleep as well. And then just some final points. Replace your if only with already. And finally, treat each worried thought with a grateful one. Okay. So earlier this year at the women's event, I did kind of share how this message came about. And although it can be a bit tough to talk about, I thought I would just briefly mention. So where this message came from is that last year I was experiencing some extreme anxiety and panic, and it went on for a while. But through this, I had the revelation that even though I've studied psychology for such a long time, I don't have all the answers on this topic. No, I really don't. And it was more about the revelation that God does. And that when we go through tough times, He is the one that has the keys to heal what we're going through and that inner pain. So I hope you can take some of the things I've learnt over this time and use them to be intentional with your own thinking and increase gratitude. And just before I end, I was just going to quickly show on the next slide. This was just the book that I was kind of studying and as well, so I just thought I would mention that too. So that's the book by Max Lucado. But thank you everyone for having me this morning. It was great to share this message with you all and be here. So thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'll hand over to Debbie now.